Hello and welcome back to the Outdoor Station and this our new virtual studio. I hope you like the views you can see here. We've got the Malvern Hills behind, we've got nice ambient lighting around the room and well, we're hoping to set the scene for an enjoyable piece of information. Now, as you can see from the screen here, we are in fact talking about the Pyrenees in this video. It's an area where many backpackers of all ages really consider as a possible summer destination trip. For the people who don't know where the Pyrenees are, it's the mountain range sandwiched between the south of France and the northern Spain. So, you know, it's a lovely area and obviously both countries have got a fantastic reputation for hospitality and welcoming people. Of course, one person that has been to the Pyrenees on a regular basis and can talk with great authority about it is my colleague and blogger Andy Howell. Andy, welcome to the show.
Hello, Bob. How are you? What a privilege it is to be on this first video experiment of yours.
This inaugural experiment. Here, I'll throw a title in as well.
Don't let it be said the outdoor station goes to places where other online services hasn't yet been.
Yes, indeed. Well, thanks for joining us, Andy. Obviously, the subject we're going to be talking about is the Pyrenees. Now, it's something I don't have, I have very little experience in, to be honest, but I understand you've been many a time, and this time of year, you get a lot of people coming to your blog, Must Be This Way, and asking various questions or researching your thoughts and comments on the Pyrenees in general. So as a newbie to the area, I'm going to ask the questions hopefully that other people will be asking, and you being the font of all knowledge will be able to answer it. So of course, the first one has to be, why do people consider the Pyrenees? What's really big about the Pyrenees?
Well, the Pyrenees, first of all, it's pretty easy to get to from the UK, you know, by budget airline or by high-speed train. And it offers something very different to UK landscapes. Even if you've walked a lot in Scotland or Snowdonia, this is a proper alpine scene. These are the proper mountains, if you like. So it's easy to get to. It's very different, and there's actually a tremendous variety of walking, hiking, backpacking options available to you. So as long as you're reasonably fit or a keen walker, you should find something to suit you there. And you also have the advantage of, you know, a foreign holiday as well. You're walking, maybe you're based in one of a series of French or Spanish hill villages. So you've got that different flavour, that different culture to deal with as well. So for many people who've only walked in the UK, it's a different walking or backpacking experience.
I mean, what's the weather like? What can it be like from the experience? I mean, what time of year, for a start, should people be considering going to this?
Well, the walking season is quite short, and a lot of people in the UK don't quite appreciate that. It's probably July till the end of September, although you really probably want to focus on the end of July, perhaps to the middle of September. The weather is generally Mediterranean, so if you've been to the southwest of France or the north of Spain, that's what the weather's like during the daytime, although because you're high in the mountains, you have the advantage of a cooler evening. So if you've ever been to the southwest of France or the Mediterranean, you know how horrible the evenings can be, very humid and hot. The advantage of being in the mountains, obviously, is that the evenings tend to be cooler. That being said, again, if you've been to the southwest of France in the summer, you'll know you can be hit by some quite dramatic storms. And Pyrenean storms are legendary, really. So if you're there in August, as the humidity begins to build up, you may well be hit by a storm for a day, and the weather might get a bit grey and overcast for a couple of days. But generally, the weather is good.
And what sort of experience should somebody have before for tackling something like the Pyrenees? I mean, is it serious mountains, and you need to be a serious walker that's got considerable experience in high mountain conditions, or can somebody with average fitness and ability, sort of navigation ability, manage okay?
Well, let's talk fitness first. I think average fitness is fine. The reality is you can pick your options. And I think most people that I talk to have a reasonably straightforward first trip, maybe basing themselves on in a campsite or in a town, doing day walks, and that gives you a feeling for how everything works. If you're obviously a very fit trail walker, then you'll probably stride out immediately. But there are some things to just be a little bit wary of. If you're walking high on the high routes, you're walking above the tree line much of the time in very hot heat during the day, and that does have an impact on some people. You're also walking at altitude. Now, you're not going to end up with altitude sickness here, but you will notice it for the first few days you're there. So for a lot of people, if they're a reasonably experienced fit walker, they just need to take their time and they just need to feel their way into how the mountains work, the kind of length you have in a day, so on. You need to probably plan on the more conservative side of the timings that you see in guidebooks. So that's fitness. If we talk about navigation isn't too much of a problem. Most of the popular trails here are very well signposted, and the big routes, the GR routes, the Grand Randonnée routes, are very well signed, and you just have to get used to spotting these little splashes of red and white paint that you see everywhere. And the same signing system is used on the Spanish side of the border as well. And then other walks tend to be also signed well. So you do need a good map. You're not going to be really struggling unless you're on one of the more ambitious routes. For example, if you were doing the high route or the early stages of the GR10, actually starting from the Mediterranean, then fog and mist can be a bit of an issue, and you probably need to be a better navigator. But if you're heading for the high mountains in the summer, you just need to be comfortable with the map, really. You don't really need to be a very, very experienced navigator with a compass. You should be okay.
Let's just look at the 6 different areas there. You've got the Pyrenees Atlantique, Haute Pyrenees, Haute Garonne, Andorra, Ariège, is that? And Pyrenees Oriental.
Ariège, yeah.
Is there an easy one of those 6 to look at as a starting point, or do they all offer the same sort of experience?
No, they're quite different. Most visitors to the Pyrenees will concentrate on the Haute Pyrenees or the High Pyrenees, because that's where you have the most dramatic mountains. That's where the tourism infrastructure is. If you're walking along the full length of the GR10 in France or the GR11 in Spain, or the high route, then obviously you'll pass through all of these areas. But for most people, the High Pyrenees, the Haute Garonne is where they will head. And even in August, one of the advantages of this area is that it never really gets that busy out on the trail. The French have a saying, many French walkers I've talked to will describe the Pyrenees compared to the Alps, for example, as plus sauvage, which it means it's wilder, it's quieter. And that's because the trails aren't quite as well built up. You have the option of going off trail more regularly. Wild camping is much easier. So most people will stick to the High Pyrenees.
So have I got it right in my mind then that there's a long trail that goes through all these areas that links one after the other, or are they separate trails? Is that basically what people do? It's a bit like the Appalachian Trail, where you start at one end and do chunks of it, or are there sort of circuits?
Well, you can do that, and I mean, there's a tremendous variety here. And if you look at the net, a lot of the coverage you'll see is for people that do the long distance trails, so some will come to those in a minute. But most people aren't walking a whole summer. I mean, a walk along the high route of the GR10 for a lot of people is a trek of a lifetime. But they form the backbone, I suppose. These long distance trails form the backbone of any walking holiday in the Pyrenees, and they're quite interesting. There were two official trails. There's the GR10 in France, and that tends to start and finish each day in a little village or a little town. It's very French. You tend to get up in the morning, have your breakfast, climb over a ridge, and then climb down in the afternoon, and then you've got another little campsite or auberge or hotel to stay in during the evening. There's a similar route on the Spanish side, the GR11, but the Spanish side tends to be a little bit more rugged. The climate is very different on the Spanish side of the Pyrenees. A lot of people talk about Africa ending at the Pyrenees ridge. So you can maybe only be half a mile away from somewhere on the French side, and you can see a thunderstorm, dramatic lightning storm in the sky, and it'll be teeming with rain on the French side, but it'll be as dry as a bone on the Spanish side. So the two trails have got very different characteristics, and although you're talking about the same mountain region, the villages and the communities have very different feels as well. So they're different trails, although they tend to work in the same kind of way. Perhaps the GR11 is a little bit more remote than the GR10. And then there's this other trail, the high route, the HRP. Now, this isn't so much an official trail. This was created by a French walker, Georges Véron. And in a rather typical French way, it's often described as more of an idea than a trail. So you'll find a number of different guidebooks about this walk. And while most of the route is similar, there will be quite significant differences in different parts of it. But the high route follows mainly the ridgeline of the mountains. And one of the attractions of that for me is that the walk takes you over the border quite regularly. So you do a week or 2 weeks on the high route and you'll experience a bit of France and a bit of Spain. So those are the long distance footpaths. Now, as I said earlier, for some people, the trek across one of these will take all summer and it will be the trek of a lifetime. Most people tend to walk these trails in stages. So they'll maybe take 2 weeks every summer and do 2 weeks of the GR10 or the high route, and they'll get to start to the finish. Some people like to walk on them and around them, as I do. I'm not particularly worried about walking every centimetre and every kilometre of the way. And to some extent, they're a little bit like the Pennine Way. A number of people have joked in the past that one of the great things about the Pennine Way is that it somehow manages to avoid some of the best bits of Yorkshire. And of course, if you're walking a linear trail, there's a lot of attractions in doing that, but there's a lot of stunning scenery that is just off the trail as well. So the trails are interesting, and if that's what captures your imagination, yeah, go for it. But a lot of people, when they first go to the Pyrenees, will base themselves in a trailhead town and perhaps do a series of day walks for 3 or 4 days, maybe move to another trailhead town, or walk for 2 or 3 days on the trail between one and the other. So they'll mix and match things a little bit, and that way you can build up your confidence about life in the mountains before you set out on one of the more demanding treks, for example.
So is it fairly easy to move about between the different camp towns, as it were?
Yeah, well, one of the nice things about the Pyrenees is you have access to the French transport system, which is very comprehensive and incredibly well integrated. And it's one of the things that's perhaps a little bit difficult to appreciate here, because our transport system isn't anywhere near as good. So, for example, if you were basing yourself in one place and you spent 3 or 4 days there and then decided to move on to a second base, you generally will be able to transfer during a day. It's an interesting way of taking a rest day, for example. And I've often done that. I'll often base myself somewhere for a few days, perhaps then spend a week walking on a long distance trail, and then depending on the flexibility of itineraries and weather or so on, maybe the weather's been bad for a couple of days and you just want to make a bit of space. I'll take a bus from one area to another, and just move on. So the transport system is very good and very affordable and very reliable.
Well, I was going to ask you about the affordability of it all because, like everything else, these holidays sometimes can run away with you when you start incurring additional costs. Would you class it by comparison to, I suppose, a walking holiday in Scotland, or another area that people might know? Is it comparable price-wise, or would you say it's an affordable? It was an inexpensive walking holiday for the experience that you get.
It is a bit like going to Scotland. It'll be as expensive or inexpensive as you can make it. I mean, you and I have often joked about how expensive it is to get to Scotland from the Midlands. I mean, it can be very expensive. And anybody that's walked the TGO Challenge will know you can spend a lot of money on that holiday. You can try and cut costs where you are as well. So the transport costs, either by a budget airline or the high-speed train, is probably comparable to the amount of money it would cost to get from, say, Birmingham or London to Inverness or Fort William. So it's not in itself, the transport there isn't in itself that much more expensive. Once you're in France, a lot depends on the walking options you have. If you are staying in a village and you're wanting to, eat out every night, and use those lovely cafes, then you'll ratchet up the costs. If you're focused on campsites or wild camping, and you're trying to keep the costs down, you can keep the costs down quite well. One of the nice things about the French infrastructure is that they're much more geared up to campers. So you'll go into many food stores and you'll find a massive array of dried foods and stuff that can be taken up into the high mountains for 5 or 6 days. So it really depends what you want to do with your holiday. But if you're drinking the bars in the evening, you're having a nice cup of coffee in the morning with your croissant, yourself, these costs add up, because if you're not a regular visitor to the continent, you're actually paying for the service of these things. So, a beer at the end of the day is a great thing, but it'll probably cost you a little bit more than it does here. So it doesn't have to cost a fortune, but you have to plan it and you have to have a lot of discipline when you're there. Otherwise, it would be comparable, I think, to if you're doing 2 weeks in the Pyrenees, it would be broadly comparable to spending 2 weeks in the Highlands.
Okay, so basically, if you're a little bit more conservative with your budget, you can manage. I remember talking to somebody who'd done the GR20, and they were saying just what a difference it made if you slept in the refuges and ate there, or if you picked the food up in the village as you went through, and obviously looked after yourself. And it was a massive difference on the budget. So I presume it's exactly the same here.
Yeah, I mean, once you're up high and you the refuges, certainly on the French side, are fascinating. Most of them, not all of them, but most of them will have good camping grounds around them, and you can camp there overnight free of charge, and you have the refuge there. You can eat in the refuges. They tend to be expensive because all of the provisions have to be flown in by helicopter, so there's quite a significant cost to that. But one of the advantages of staying or camping near a refuge is that at the end of the day, at the end of your walking day, they will generally sell you a cold beer, and that's a kind of luxury that you'll spend. But you don't have to do that. I mean, by preference, I tend not to eat in refuges. I tend to take my own food with me, and one of the things about being in a mountain area is that a lot of the food there has developed over generations to be mountain ready food. So high mountain sausage will last for days in your backpack. Mountain cheese will as well, and you can live for days on sausage, cheese, maybe a bit of pasta, some fresh fruit that you carry with you. So generally, I wouldn't spend a lot of money on food. As I'm trekking from place to place. Where I'll spend money on food is when I'm stuck in a trailhead or a town.
Well, I mean, certainly the pictures you sent through, which I've just been showing while you've been talking, as you can see there, I mean, it looks absolutely beautiful. I mean, from a practical point of view, equipment-wise, are we talking you take exactly the same for this as you would do for doing something like walking in Scotland for a few days?
Broadly speaking,
Presumably it's chillier in the evenings, or can be.
well, the first thing that I'd say is that if you are doing anything other than day walking, so if you're walking from place to place or you're doing a few days on a trail, you really do want to embrace the lightweight philosophy as much as you can. You really don't want to carry much with you. I mean, it's very warm, so if you've got walking trousers or walking clothes with you, you can wash those out and they dry very quickly, or they'll dry as you walk. This isn't the kind of place where you need to carry loads of changes of clothing or a pair of jeans for the evening or something like that. You probably want a good warm fleece for the evening. I tend to carry my down jacket with me when I go to the Pyrenees, and I'm grateful that I've got it. But I won't be carrying much else beyond that. And one of the reasons for that is that it's actually walking the Pyrenees that got me into lightweight backpacking.
I didn't know that.
Because you're walking in such heat, you really don't want to be carrying big loads. So actually, you don't need to carry much with you. Maybe a couple of pairs of walking trousers, a couple of shirts for walking, and a waterproof. That will do you really. Oh, and something for warm for the evening.
And would you say that the accommodation is, if you chose not to take your tent and shelter, the accommodation is pretty standard all the way across the whole region?
I mean, this is one of the attractions of the Pyrenees, and I said at the beginning that there is something here for everybody. And I think a lot of the stuff you'll find on the web is written by more adventurous people or younger people that like to do a lot of wild camping. But many people walk the GR trails, staying in normal accommodation. I've just finished reading somebody's trail diary of walking the whole of the GR10 in one go, and I think he camped once for one night. Now, you'll tend to find a range of options depending on where you are. There are a series of gîtes in the French mountains. Now, these are broadly comparable to a youth hostel here, perhaps a bit smaller, but they're communal living, really. Big room with big benches, and you just put down your sleeping mat, or there's a mat provided for you there. And some of these gîtes can be quite basic, but increasingly, as the tourist economy evolves, you'll find these gîtes run by young people, and very often they've got a lot of services in them. They've got internet connections and that kind of thing. There are small family-run hotels. Most of the villages will have one. And then the major trailhead towns will have a lot of accommodation in them because they are very popular places for holidays for families. You'll find big family campsites there. And in the High Pyrenees, many of the towns you'll visit are also very busy ski centres during the winter, so there'll be a lot of accommodation there. And then when you head up high, you have the refuges, which are like high mountain hostels. I'm trying to think if anybody's been to Scotland and seen the hostel in Glenafric, the old Beath hostel. It's that kind of remoteness that you're looking at. But they're well geared up, and the French ones on the High Pyrenees over the last 10 years has been a program of refurbishment. And on the Spanish side, the refugios. My Spanish accent isn't very good, but the refugios are quite impressive as well, and maybe tend not to be quite as remote as the French ones. So you have an option. You'll often find there's a campsite. You'll often find there's a gîte or a little hostel, and maybe a small family hotel as well. And then if you get into the trailhead towns, you'll have 6 or 7 campsites to choose from, and a lot of different accommodation, from small family hotels to things that are quite posh. All of the key airports there will have good train links into the major access points. And on the French side, because it's the easiest side to get to, you're talking about the towns of Pau, Bagnères de Luchon, and Lourdes to some extent. So, and once you get there, your ticket will often, the ticket you buy at the train station will often include both train and bus transport, because it's a properly integrated system. So, if you end up in the town of Pau and you buy a ticket out to one of the mountain trail villages or trail towns like Courtrai, your ticket will, and the timetable will show the start time from Pau train station, and the finish time will be at the bus station at Courtrai, for example. And you'll buy one ticket, and the change from the train to the bus will be shown as a change. If you were changing on a British train journey, you were doing a train station change, it would be shown in that way. So
is that a serious comparison to being a British train journey?
I mean, it's much easier. It's much easier because you're buying one ticket, and you will find that in the major ticket booths in train stations, you will find people who speak good enough English to be able to sell you the right ticket. Obviously you want to buy your TGV train ticket if you're going by train well in advance. But the integrated ticketing system really does work well. It's a good transport system.
No, I was just joking about comparing it to the British transport system, where the bus usually leaves 10 minutes before the train arrives and that sort of thing.
Well, the French system, I said earlier on that if you're looking to change your location for a day, it always makes me laugh, because the bus in the morning will take you to the town where you change, and then the bus out again won't leave till 2 o'clock in the afternoon, very typically. So basically you're sitting in the middle of a nice little French town, maybe a couple of hours, 3 hours to spare, and of course right next to the bus station will be quite a nice little bistro or restaurant to have your lunch in. So that's obviously quite a well thought out system of supporting the local economy.
Yeah.
But basically you can transfer anywhere within a day without any difficulties.
Well, I think you've certainly whetted the appetite. We've seen some great pictures, some good introductions regards where to head to. Of course, a lot of people will be doing their research online, and this will be part of it. But the other side of it is that we all like to have a guidebook to hand, particularly good ones with links to various useful travel features, as well as a sort of bit of history or further detail. So, of all the guidebooks that you've come across that sort of cover the area, what would you recommend for a beginner like myself going to the area, wants more of a flavour of it, and also a little bit of extra information just in case the weather turns against me and it gives me something else to do? So, which books would you suggest?
Our old friend Cicero, a good starting point. The kind of Pyrenees Bible really is Kev Reynolds. Kev Reynolds' Walks and Climbs in the Pyrenees. It's a very sparse book really, but it's quite useful because it does little descriptions of walks from point to point, and you can put them together to create your own walks, your own itineraries. But that's a very, very popular book. There are a couple of other guides you'll find as well, but the Pyrenees guides from Cicerone are where I start with. They also produce a very good guidebook on the GR10 that covers the whole length of that. Now, even if you're not walking the whole of the GR10, you'll find it probably describes a little bit of the area you're in. And there is also a very good Cicerone guide for the GR11. If you really want to go a bit further, Kev Reynolds has produced what I can only describe as a reference book on the Pyrenees. It's part of the Cicerone High Mountain series, or World Mountain series, I think. It's not the kind of thing you put in your rucksack because it's like a house brick, but it is a fascinating, almost encyclopedic resource for planning in the Pyrenees. There's also a lot of information now available on the web, and most of these trailhead towns, Courtrai and so on, will have websites. A lot of the high refuges do. If you go to my website, there's a lot of information on the day walks on the towns we've been talking about there also. And then for maps, the best walking maps of this area are a 1 to 50,000 series. Now, it's kind of, again, it's different terrain to Britain, so whereas you might think of taking a 1 to 25,000 map there, the best walking maps are the randonnée maps that you'll see at Stanford's bookshop. So you can either drop in there in London or use their web store. And the 1 to 50,000 maps are about the right scale for these mountains, and they have all the trails well indicated on them. So there's no difficulty with maps. And of course, these days as well, you can buy computer maps of the Pyrenees from most of the major computer mapping companies as well.
Excellent. Okay, Andy, I think, we've touched on most things there. As I say, if people would like to give us some feedback on this video clip and on your blog site as well, and if they want any further information,
you might just want to say that we'll come back for We'll come back for a second conversation, which is about a really exciting backpacking tour of the High Pyrenees.
Definitely.
Because there are a lot of people who get very excited by that.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much indeed for your time, Andy. That's been really useful.
Thank you.
Right. A lot of people have found that of use. So, as I say, do let us know either directly at the Outdoor Station, info@theoutdoorstation.co.uk, or via Andy's blog, Must Be This Way, or on any of the YouTube comments that you can place beneath this video in YouTube.
Machine will have eyes, ears, and a voice.